What is Open UK? Hopefully there's some idea in the room about this already. We're a predominantly soup-based organisation, driven by soup in the interests of soup, and all of our meetings are fundamentally based around the consumption of soup. But we also sometimes have a think about epilepsy. So, as Sophie said earlier on, we came together as a confederation of the regional epilepsy networks. So this is not something that has arisen from nowhere. There was vast amounts of superb work happening in each of the 16 regional epilepsy networks before we came together at the end of 2015. And some of those networks have been running for 20 years now. We're set up to share local, regional and national ideas, to put into place quality improvement projects, and to try and secure better resources for children and young people with epilepsy. What has happened is that by coming together as a confederation of regional epilepsy networks, we've spoken with one voice. And I remember about 3 weeks after we sort of constituted ourselves as Open UK, which just sort of happened by just us just saying that it had happened. It wasn't like a sort of formal thing with people sort of signing a treaty or something like that. We just went, we're one thing now. And I sent an email to Isabel Heyman, who at the time was leading the National Paediatric Neuropsychiatry Liaison Group, and just briefly explained what we in Open UK were. And she copied me into everybody in her group and said, we need to work with this group because, you know, they speak with a loud voice, they're well represented. And all of a sudden you could see by coming together and, you know, with everybody who delivers epilepsy care speaking with one voice, all of a sudden we were being heard louder. And that's been really, really important. Then the question is, I guess, so is anybody paying any attention? Colin tweeted this morning as I was on my train, probably at about 20 past 7. So Dr. Colin Dunkley, looking forward to seeing everyone at our second Epilepsy 12 Open UK Improvement Focused Conference today. Youth advocates up first. Maybe epilepsy is coming out of the shadows. So in 2015, we heard from the National Clinical Director that she'd been unsighted on paediatric epilepsy. So lots of interest in other chronic conditions, but until that point, the national agenda hadn't focused on paediatric epilepsy at all. So epilepsy was in the shadows. I've gone too far. So who's listening to epilepsy to Open UK now? Well, so we work closely with Epilepsy 12. I represent the whole of Open UK on the Epilepsy 12 programme board. The UK Epilepsy Programme Board, chaired by Professor Helen Cross, which also has representatives from the Royal College of Nursing, from the Joint Epilepsy Charities, from the College, from Epilepsy 12, from lots of people, stakeholders, and children and young people involved in epilepsy care. So we're represented on that national board. We have representatives and direct links into the British Paediatric Epilepsy Group of the British Paediatric Neurology Association, with Batch from Community Paediatrics. We've been asked to participate in the Mind the Gap programme. So Young Epilepsy run a 2-day programme every year, I think, in which they highlight the gaps between what we should be doing in epilepsy care and what we're actually doing at the moment. And actually that should be at the core of everything that we're doing here today, is just trying to narrow that gap. So it's been really important to work with them. We participate in UK research, for example, the Castle Benign Epilepsy with Centrotemporal Spikes study. We've participated in the NIHR Children and Young People's MedTech panel. And of course, we are the go-to group for the National Clinical Director for Children and Young People, Jackie Cornish, in terms of the relationship between epilepsy and NHS England. So when they want to get a bid in for the NHS long-term plan with about 4 days' notice, they come to us and we deliver. And when they want a statement on the use of cannabinoids in epilepsy, they come to us and we say, yeah, no, you better ask someone else about that. So we directed them towards Helen Cross and Finbar Callan and Elsa McLennan, who I think is here today. Hello! And then they do a much better job. So that sort of kind of, who do we go to when we need the voice of epilepsy? Then increasingly Open UK is that team. And of course, we were the voice on the best practice tariff iteration for April 2019, which has been somewhat fruitful in that routine access to clinical psychology for children and young people with epilepsy is now in the best practice tariff. We haven't got any new money for it yet, but we're working on that. So, what did the NHS long-term plan say about paediatric epilepsy? Not a lot, but it's definitely a start. So, from 2019 to 2020, clinical networks will be rolled out to ensure that we improve the quality of care for children with long-term conditions such as diabetes, epilepsy, and asthma. So the first thing to say is that means that the word epilepsy in the context of children is actually in a major government document, which is the first time. So this is pretty big news, though it isn't a long paragraph. What does it mean when they say clinical networks will be rolled out? Of course, we're not really certain yet, but we know what their intention is you're probably aware that there's kind of 7 regional NHS England structures that look a little bit like what used to be the strategic clinical networks, and there's going to be some form of marrying up support, influence, and possibly resources that will flow through those NHS England structures into our clinical networks. So we all belong to a regional clinical epilepsy network, and they will always remain in existence and continue with their function. How they will be better resourced through this new structure, we don't yet know, but we're trying to help fuel that discussion. So when it says at the bottom that they will support bespoke quality improvement projects, we've made a bit more progress on that. So later on, when we're doing our sort of tabletop discussions, Colin's going to ask us, what does good look like for a regional clinical epilepsy network? We've been thinking about how we can make that better. A good example of how you can achieve quality improvement through clinical networks is through diabetes. So if you look on the y-axis here, then we've got the outcome measure of the HbA1c. So diabetes are really lucky because you can blood test quality in diabetes. Damn them! You can see that along the x-axis, that as time has progressed, then in the UK, the HbA1c has begun to fall towards something like what good looks like, although not quite as good as other places in Europe. So that's the trend. So they set up their clinical networks in about 2010. So we're at least 10 years ahead of the game on that one. They got a best practice tariff, quite a healthy one. They've set up quality assurance boards, and they've had a delivery plan. And more recently, something to do with QI. So how does this compare with Europe? If you look at the x-axis on here, then you can see that things start off a little bit earlier in Sweden than they have been in the UK. And if you map England and Wales onto the Swedish sort of timeline for improvement in HbA1c, you can see that we're lagging behind them, but still on the same sort of trajectory. The Swedes had done everything a little bit earlier than us, but they found that they'd got stuck at an HbA1c which looks like it was around the sort of 63 sort of level. And then they also started putting in place something to do with quality improvement, QI, in around 2010 and 2011, which subsequently caused an improvement in the HbA1c in Sweden. So here in the UK, if you look down this list, the thing that we in epilepsy always point at and say, look, they got investment. It's all about investment, and investment is third from the bottom. The honest truth is they did quite a few different things to improve quality in diabetic care. So culture change, lowered targets, supportive regional networks, national audit and comparison. Indeed, a little bit of investment, probably true. But they had to do lots of things in order to achieve benefit. So what they did was they did a 2-day training event, mix of theory and practice, encouraging high-functioning teams. They taught them improvement methods. They did process mapping. They did team planning, and they worked out how to use data. So using data is important. Epilepsy 12 will be the single biggest producer of usable data for us to work out how we can make epilepsy care better. So using data is absolutely crucial in this whole process. And the individual trusts that participated in this program did a number of different things. Some of them worked on projects to reduce the number of DNAs. Some of them worked on patient education, improved self-care, carb counting, supporting patients on insulin pump therapy, improving clinic experience, perhaps a clinic chat checklist. And some of them chose to target the HbA1c. So there were lots of different projects that were done in different trusts, using resources available at local level and focusing on local issues. And what has been reported for those diabetic units is that the project work that they're undertaking to improve quality is happening much better and much more quickly. There's accountability, so you know that if it's your task to complete activity A, that you will be held to account by your team. There's a clear goal of development, it's improved relationships and communication, and people's enthusiasm in a stressful and busy job have improved. So, the college led a QI advisory group drawn from Open UK members, describing what a good service looks like, and part of this was a survey that many of you will have participated in, and these are some of the things that described what a good service looks like when the college team tried to define that. So with all this information, then, and this is my big reveal, we are happy to launch today the Royal College EQIP project. And this is a pilot project that in the first instance will provide face-to-face training for a collaborative of 10 teams in what we describe as a safe learning space. So presumably they mean I won't be able to make any jokes about anybody. And there will be comprehensive support for this, and you are being encouraged as of today to apply within your trust teams to join this EQIP project with the anticipation that the first face-to-face teaching session will happen in November 2019, and then in April or May of next year we will finish that session off. It's a proof of concept, so at the moment there is funding available for this whole pilot project in terms of the venue, the catering, your accommodation, and everything that will be delivered on the day. I think it will be expected that each individual unit will fund their own travel to and from the venue. And if this concept is proven, then it is anticipated that this will be rolled out across the UK with additional funding found. so i.e. Could be scalable. So what we know from the world of diabetes and from Sweden, where obviously they do everything better, is that this will help us to become better, more high-performing, more cohesive teams. It means that we can deliver improvement in care for the children and young people that are so important at the heart of everything that we do, and will help us to engage better with patients and families. And obviously your accomplishments and achievements in this area will be shared through Epilepsy 12, the college, and through other channels. So what we would welcome you to do is to apply. If you go to the coffee area at lunchtime, then there are printed copies of the forms. There are some special mints, which don't know if anybody's found the mints yet. No? The trick is that in the corner of the mint box, there's a little bit that you peel back. So it took me about 15 minutes to get into my mints. But once in, then we're looking good. Also free pen. And I can encourage, and an application form which is stapled in the bottom left-hand corner, which is a unique form of collation. Please go back to your team. Your team can be broadly described. So I think we're thinking, receptionists, secretaries, neurophysiologists. So we very much welcome your applications, which close in September. So to conclude, none of this works without your regional epilepsy networks being high functioning. So please work to make your network even better. Use your Epilepsy 12 data to lever change and to generate benefit for the children and young people that sit at the heart of all of this. And please do apply for the RCPCH EQIP pilot. Thank you.